This is the Adobe Customization Wizard, and this is how it opens up when you first launch. We're going to approach this by opening up Acrobat Pro, the flat files for it, and we're going to go through this panel by panel. We're going to take our time to do that, and we'll discuss things as I go through this so that you have a nice record of what is what, and I'm going to split this up so that it'll be in segments. So the first panel is the personalization options. Now, the first field here is serial number, and if you have a serial number to install or a named install, you can place a serial number there and proceed, or you can select grant offline exception and disable registration if you are in a lockdown area that doesn't have a connection. Now, the catch here is that in order to get the offline exception and disable the registration here while you're working in the Customization Wizard, you need to be online. So that's the one catch-22 here, is in order to get the offline exception and disable the registration, you actually need to be online while you're doing that. The next section is called installation path, and it's there just in case a customer or user wants to place the application in a different location other than the C drive and program files. Now, this is not the default, but you do have some users who prefer to have the C drive entirely clean, so they'll put everything on the D drive or other lettered drives, and that's what this particular feature allows. The next section is the EULA option. This is to suppress the display of the end user license agreement, aka EULA, and you can actually do that here. Click display EULA, and you have the EULA there, and you can read through that if you so choose. And note, when you select this option, you're given the notification here. By choosing this option, you accept the terms of the EULA on behalf of your organization. Represent that your organization has explicitly granted you authority to do so, and agree that your organization will be bound by its terms and conditions. So, we're covering ourselves here, and that's the Personalizations Options panel. This is the Installation Options panel. The first section is Default Viewer for PDF files. The first one, Default Selection, is Installer will decide which product will be the default. The secondary option is Make Acrobat the default PDF viewer. The next section is Remove Previous Version of Acrobat. Note uninstalls any existing installation of Acrobat Professional, Standard, or Elements version 6 or later during this install. The caveat to this is that it will not remove the same version number. So if you have, say, version 11, 11.1 will not remove version 11.0. That's a limitation. Next is remove all versions of Reader. By default, it's not checked. It says note uninstalls any existing installation of Adobe Reader 6.0 or later during this install. Next section is Enable Optimization. Note this feature allows the installer to run a defragmentation utility on a portion of the target drive during installation, improving launch time and performance. It's recommended you leave this enabled. The next item is Enable Caching of installer files on the local hard drive. This is used for repair and during the update process. There is an option to uncheck this, and we will discuss that later. But for now, let's just move on. The next section is Run Installation. This is normally set up for like the Setup exe. You can run it interactively, which is the default with full interface. The second selection is unattended with no user interaction, only a progress bar. Next item is silently, no interface. Also, the next section is if rebooted require at the end of the installation. The default is to prompt the user for a reboot. The first selection is reboot without prompt. Normally you don't want to do this because you might have users working on their documents or applications, and if it reboots without prompting them, they may lose data. So normally you want them to prompt the user for reboot. The last option is suppress reboot. A lot of IT administrators like this because they're normally doing updates or installations and doing multiple installations or updates, and they want to do just one reboot. This is very useful, and a lot of IT admins like this. The next selection is application languages. The option is to allow the end user to choose the application language. It says note user will be able to select language only if running the installer in interactive mode. That means the interface is running. The next area is application language, and you can select any of the languages here that you want Acrobat to run in if you have a all language serial number. The next option is set the language to the OS language, but let the user select the language if the OS language is not installed. This option is only available if you're running an unintended install or a silent install. The next area is Acrobat MUI languages. It says, please enter the list of languages to be installed for an MUI serial number. This is an all languages serial number. So if you select this one, install all languages, it will list all the languages available. Or you can enter them manually. So let's do this just as a test. Install all languages, and you see it's got a 5-character code for every language. You can edit this list and go through and select which ones you want to install. Again, this is if you have the MUI all language serial number. So that's the caveat for this. Now I'm going to remove this information and just let it do the default English install. Note if you're installing multiple languages or all the languages, it's going to significantly affect the size and footprint of the installation on your systems. Okay, and that's the installation options panel. The features panel. Now, the features panel does a couple of different things here. As you see, we have View Adobe PDF selected. And this description here is optional plugins and support for viewing PDF files. It's visible and collapsed, and the initial state is this feature will be installed on the local hard drive. You'll notice that in this secondary pane, there's the option to expand it, and then there's pre-flight. Again, it tells you what the feature does, lets you know if it's visible and collapsed, and you can change these. You can select here and choose to either have it visible and collapsed, visible and expanded, or not visible at all. So, and also have the initial state, and you can select that as well. It will either be available to be installed on the local hard drive, or it will not be available. So you can choose what your user has access to. The next selection is Create Adobe PDF. And then we have the Autodesk filters and the Acrobat PDF Maker items. And again, the only thing that is really changing up here as you select through is the description. All the other options remain the same, which is you can choose to whether or not to have these visible or not, or you can have these items available or not available. The next area is the languages, and this one just has English listed. And just to note, the default installation language for Acrobat is English. Now this feature is called Files and Folders, and it allows you to copy files into locations where you're going to have your install of Acrobat DC or Acrobat Classic. And you can do stuff like this. For instance, if I wanted to copy some JavaScript files, I could copy them into here. Now there are already two files there that are there by default, but I want to install a couple of files that I usually have installed on my systems anyway. First one is to open up the console. Second one is to close the console, and they're buttons that I set up, and they should work. But you can copy those files in, and then when you install, they get placed within your installer for your package, and all users will get these two buttons in their other tools area. So that is the Files and Folders feature. This is the registry panel. And the registry panel is an area which you should know what you're doing. Most of the time our users are grabbing preferences from an installed system that already has Acrobat installed or Reader installed, and they want to copy the settings from their installed session into the package. So we're going to do that right now. And I've got something set up already, so let's go to the area that I want to go to. Go to Adobe Acrobat, DC, and I want to go down to JS Prefs. And you'll notice there are quite a few preferences that I have here that I want to pull over. So we grab this reciprocal path here over in the package, and what we're going to do is we're going to just drag this one right over, and it's creating all those preferences in the package. All very straightforward, done. And now we can close that up if we want to. And when we install, we will have all the JS preferences that were on my computer, and they'll be on the packages for every user that gets this installed. This panel is called Shortcuts, and it's very simple. It's whether or not you want your users to have this shortcut or that shortcut or any of these shortcuts installed at all. So if you don't like that Adobe Acrobat DC shortcut on your desktop, you can remove it. You can also add them back too. If you don't want either one of these shortcuts in the programs of the Start menu, they don't have to be there. It's very straightforward, very simple. This is the Server Locations panel. This is an area where you can add several installation paths if you don't want to cache the installer files on your local systems. It's a pretty simple way of doing things. You can just add location and then add the location of a server. And you can add a location of another server. And these are just examples. And there you have it. If DNS fails, it can go to one server. If that's down, it can go to the next server and look for those same installation files. If that server's down, it can go down, and so on and so on and so on. This way, your clients have a location to get their installation files. And that's the Server Locations panel. This is the PDF Creation panel. The first section is the Adobe PDF Printer settings. The first item is Default PDF Output Folder. This is where your PDFs are saved by default. For instance, this is My Documents, or you can set it to something else with the Browse button here. It says, note this folder must exist on all user systems. The next entry is Adobe PDF Output Folder. Now, this is what you want to do with the PDF once it gets to the output folder. And do you want it to just save to the default PDF output folder, or do you want it to prompt for an Adobe PDF file name? The default is to prompt. The next item is Adobe PDF Security. The default is set to none, but you can change it to confirm security for each job, or use the last known security settings. The next entry is TrueType Font Download Options. It's automatic by default, but you can select Outline, Bitmap, or Native TrueType. PostScript Output Options. It's set for default as Optimized for Speed, but again you have a selection. Optimize for portability, encapsulated PostScript, or archive format. The next section is a selection of items for the PDF. The first item is View Adobe PDF Results. The next item is Add Document Information. This is the metadata information, for instance, in Microsoft Word. The next area is Ask to replace existing PDF. By default, it's set not to, but you can select it to ask for to replace the PDF. Next is Rely on system fonts only, do not use document fonts. This is set by default. Next is Adobe PDF Settings files. These are your job option settings, and we've got all of the settings that are here in Pro. The default is set for standard job options, but you can add your own. For instance, we can add our own here. And we can set it for the default with this button here. This is the security panel. We'll go through each section and discuss each one in brief detail. The first section is Protected View. There are 3 settings to Protected View, each a higher level of security. Please test all workflows that you're going to use with the security settings, and then you'll be able to deploy safely. The 3 settings are Off, Files from potentially unsafe locations, or All files. The next section is Enhanced Security Settings. This exists in 2 instances, first for the standalone and second for the browser. It has 4 different settings for each. It's Enable, Enable and Lock, Disable, Disable and Lock. The default is on. For the browser, again the same 4 options: Enable, Enable and Lock, Disable, Disable and Lock. And again, the default is on. The next section is Privileged Locations. Trusted file, folder, or host. Note, different trusted objects appear in different color files, folders, hosts. Let's do an example here. We'll add a file and hit the Browse button. We're going to select Background, open up, and there we have the first item. It's a trusted file. Next, we're going to add a folder, and we'll select the Browse button. And I want to select My Documents and say OK. We're going to trust My Documents area. And finally, we're going to add a host. And there we've added all three. Now, note you can prevent end users from changing these settings for files and folders or for trusted hosts. This is the digital signature panel. The first section is verification, and the first area is default verification method. You have multiple choices here. One is to use the document specified method, prompt if it's not available. The second is use the document specified method, use the default method if it is not available. And the third is always use the default method, overrides the document specified method. Now, you can prevent the user from modifying the default, or you can leave it up to them to change it if they need to. Now, the default here is to verify signatures when the document is opened. Again, this is something a customer needs to evaluate to see if they want to maintain that. There are some customers that don't, not the recommended workflow, but that option is available to them. And they can also lock that up too, prevent the user from modifying that setting. The next area is creation. The first section is default signature method, and the default is Adobe Default Security. Now, you can set it up to ask when I sign or select third party, and then when you select third party, you can modify the third party handler if you'd like. You can disable this modify default signature setting. You can also show the location and contact information when signing. And you can enable reviewing of document warnings when certifying only, never, or always. The next item is prevent signing until document warnings are reviewed, and it says never as the default, but when certifying only is an option. And then again, you can prevent the user from changing these settings. The next area is signature details, and within that is reasons for signing. You can show the reasons by checking that item, and then you can select one of these, or you can add your own. Some customers may have their own that they need to add for their workflow, and this allows them to do that. After you've done that, you can also prevent the user from modifying those settings if you've selected that too. Now, the next section is for directory servers and trusted identities. Now, you can set these by importing the directory servers, and you can import your trusted identities from your Acrobat address book. So either one of these can be imported and set, and then we're done with the digital signatures panel. This is the rights management servers panel, and you can disable this from the get-go if you don't want your users to configure this at all. Simple checkbox, and they will not be able to add those servers. However, if you do have a server that you use internally, you can add it here. For instance, we've added our server. This is the WebMail Profiles panel. And some IT administrators are going to want to disable this right away because they don't want their users to have access to webmail clients. However, there are some customers who do use webmail as their corporate or business emails, and we provide the opportunity to do so here. You can add Gmail, you can add Yahoo Mail, or you can add other. Now, if you're adding other, you need to have the port numbers here, and I'm going to add a demonstration here. Now, the security may be either TLS or SSL for either one, and these ports may be different. Now, you'll need to check with your provider as to whether or not these ports will work or whether they have specific ports they want you to use. And simply add, and then you can select your default. Online Services and Features panel. This has changed drastically since our last version. The first section is Online Features, and you can disable product updates here. You can load trusted root certificates from Adobe, and you can either ask or enable and install silently, or you can disable that. You can also set up a prompt for the user to open save when using Internet Explorer by checking here. You can also disable the upsell message that may occur. Now the next section is Services Integration, and these settings disable and lock features that use Adobe Acrobat Document Cloud services. You can disable all of the services, and that just covers everything. Some customers may choose that, some customers may not want to do that. They may want to pick and choose. So if they pick and choose, they can say disable Adobe Acrobat Document Cloud services and check that and leave the rest open. They can select disable Adobe Send for Signature, but leave the cloud services open. They may disable the preference synchronization across devices, or they may disable third-party connectors such as Dropbox, Google Drive, etc. Again, this is totally dependent upon the customer's workflow and their security preferences on how they want to apply this. But we give them all the options and granularity that is necessary. This is the Comments and Forms panel. First section is Forms Autocomplete. It has three settings, the default being off, but you can set it for basic and advanced. You can also prevent end users from modifying this setting in Edit Preferences and Forms. If you set one of the settings, you can also select Remember Numerical Data. Now, the next section is Shared Review Server Settings. Now, you can disable this entirely and not allow users to add them, or if you want to, you can add one for your users. You select the type, network, web server, SharePoint workspace, and then you give it the path. And then you can set the distribution method, upload to server and send email with link, send email with attachment, or save to local disk and send later manually. We're going to leave it at the default and then select Add. And there we have our added share review server. This is the File Attachments panel. You can prevent a document from opening other files and launching other applications by simply checking this box. You can also set it up flexibly. Each one of these file extension types has a setting for allowed and unspecified or prohibited. We allow you the flexibility to choose. If there's a file type here that is not listed, then you can set up your own. And then it comes in as unspecified, but you can set it for allowed or prohibited. You can also set the default action for unspecified file types for prompt user without the ability to set the file type as allowed, or the default, which is prompt user with the ability to set the file type as allowed, or never launch files of unspecified types. The notation here is, note, any additional file types which do not appear in the list above are treated as unspecified. That's the File Attachments panel. This is the Header, Footer, Watermark, and Background panel. If you created header and footer saved settings, you can add them here. Let's do that. You can also add watermark saved settings. And you can add background save settings. And that's the header, footer, watermark, and background panel. This is the protection panel. This is where you can add custom redaction code sets. And you'll see we have two defaults that are already there. If you'd like to add, simply select Add and navigate to your custom XML file and add. You can also set the Remove Hidden Information settings here. Remove hidden information when closing a document. Remove hidden information when sending a document by email. And that's the protection panel. This is the Launch Other Applications. If you wanted to add, say, a secondary installation, you could do that here, or a custom plugin, or a custom app that interacts with Acrobat. This is the Tools panel. This is brand new. The instruction says specify the tools that you want to be available in the Tools tab in Acrobat and the shortcuts that appear by default in the Tools pane. So here are the tools that are available, and you can just scroll down through these, and it's got all of them. Now you can enable the shortcuts, disable the shortcuts. So that means if you have a custom workflow for a particular group, you can select the tools that you want to have available to them and then any other tools, you can disable those and they will not be available to those users. And you can, at that point, you can disable user customization of tool shortcut, and when disabled and locked, end users will not be able to customize the tool shortcuts that appear in the tools pane. It's a very cool tool, and I think some of our enterprises will find it very valuable. Other settings. Now, other settings provides printer settings to enable toner saver. This is a lean print feature, and some customers may find this useful, especially if they're wanting to save some money on toner for actual print jobs that they're doing. The customers that use this will probably be doing a lot of printing, so it's available there, and it's a nice feature to have to be able to set out to a group. This is the Direct Editor panel. I usually advise customers to not use this panel unless they are very sure and very knowledgeable on what they are doing. They have to have an in-depth knowledge of MSI tables and how they work. The warning here is that if you make an error, it can completely destroy your installation. It's a highly useful tool if you know what you're doing, but I think for most users this is an area similar to the Windows registry for a lot of our normal users that we advise against going into. Now, while you can make the changes here in the Direct Editor, the changes here, if something goes wrong, is something that we really don't support. So please advise customers to use with caution. And that's the Customization Wizard, panel by panel. Thanks. Bye-bye.